Today's date is September 14th, 2016, and our learning goal today is very similar to what it's been all week. We're going to continue clarifying and making sure we all feel really solid about rounding decimals using what you know about place value. Okay, but first, let's use the problem of the day to help us figure out how we're feeling right now. It says a bag of 100 pencils weighs 194 and 2/10 grams. How much does one pencil weigh? Round your answer to the nearest tenth. What is the question asking? That's always step one. You should write, what is the question asking? Roni?
It's asking, round your answer to the nearest tenth, and how much does one pencil weigh?
Yeah, the question is asking us to figure out how much one pencil weighs. What you said first about rounding your answer to the nearest tenth, that's important information, huh? What other important information is there that we need to know? Alina?
They have a bag of 100 pencils.
Okay.
They all weigh 194.2.
Yeah, how do you say that number in word form?
194 and 2/10.
Yeah, okay. And we want to, as Roni said earlier, we want to round our answer to the nearest tenth. So how can we solve this problem? What's the first thing I need to do? Kevin?
You need to draw a chart.
Sure. All right. And then how would you like me to arrange my numbers?
So you divide 194.2 by 100.
Why do you have to divide 194.2 by 100?
Because now 100 pencils in the bag.
Yeah, and we want to figure out how much one pencil weighs, huh? Now, when I divide something by 100, I could either move the numbers, the digits themselves, or I could move the decimal point. Which one should I do, Aditya?
The decimal point.
Okay, if I'm dividing, do I move the decimal point to the left or to the right? How many spaces?
2.
Okay, so if I move it 1, 2, that means that one pencil weighs 1.942 grams. Okay, so Kevin, you were saying I need to put that number on a place value chart, huh? Okay, so I have 1.942. Okay, what would I need to do next? Junebok?
Draw a number line.
Okay. And what would my lower limit be? What am I trying to round to, first of all? What am I trying to round to? Zeev? The nearest tenth. So is this version of the number the one that I want to use? No, not necessarily, huh? Because I wanted to start in the tenths place. So how many tenths do I have if I don't have any ones? Kevin? 19 tenths. 4 hundredths and 2 thousandths. Good. So what would my lower limit be? Itai? 19 tenths. Now, if I want to, I could write it like this. Or how else could I write that number? Aditi, how else could I write 19 tenths? Can you tell it to me in decimal form? Is 0.19? 0.19. Is that 19 tenths? That's 19 what? Yeah, this is 19 hundredths, and we don't want that. We want 1.9, so that's 19 tenths. Okay. Now, what would my upper limit be? If my lower limit is 19 tenths, Ella, what's my upper limit?
20.
20 tenths. What's another way to write 20 tenths, Ben?
Write it 2.0.
2.0, yeah, okay. Now, what's the midpoint? Lakshin? 19 tenths and 5 hundredths. Now, what's another way to write 19 tenths and 5 hundredths? Aditya? 1.95. Okay, so do you guys, this is a very important part. Do you guys see how the black numbers are the same as the red words? Right? Are you guys also noticing that 1.9 is the same as the 1.9 up here?
Yeah.
And then 2.0 is just 1/10 more than that. And then the midpoint, 1.95, is 5 hundredths. You add 5 hundredths to the lower limit. Okay? So let's take a look. 1.94. Is that more or less than my midpoint? So that must mean that the number rounds down to what? 1.9. So my final answer, one pencil weighs 1.9 grams. Okay. For number 1 on your homework, it asked you to round 43 and 586 thousandths to the nearest tenth, hundredth, and 1. Okay, so let's look at the tenths first. Looking at rounding 43 and 58, 586 thousandths to the nearest tenth, do I care about the thousandths place right now? No, right? I only need to look at the tenths place and the place right next to it. What's one place smaller than the tenths place? The hundredths. Okay. Now, I could find my lower limit by looking at the numbers I have right now. 43.5. That's 435 tenths. What's another way to write 435 tenths? What's the standard way to write 435 tenths? Besisht? So 435 tenths in standard form is the same as 43.5. Do you guys notice how that's the same as what you have up here in your number? Okay. Now, my upper limit is 436 tenths. How do I write that number in standard form? A DT? $43.6, yeah. Okay. Now, my midpoint is 435 tenths and 5 hundredths. How do I write that number in standard form? Junbok? 5/8? If I have 435 tenths and 5 hundredths, what number do I need in the hundredths place?
The hundredths place you need a 5.
Okay, so it's 43.55. Now, basically what I'm doing is I'm comparing, as I was saying, basically what you're doing is you're comparing this number, 43.58, to the midpoint, 43.55. Is my number bigger or smaller than the midpoint? If it's bigger than the midpoint, that means it rounds up. So your final answer is 43.6. I love how Arhan said, right now we're rounding to the tenths. So we're concerned about the tenths place, right? Do we care about the hundredths place or the thousandths place right now? No. Do we need to write the hundreds, tens, and ones place though? Yeah, because they're the places before the tenths place. So for our lower limit, we can write 243.8 because that's the same thing as 2,438 tenths. Does that make sense? Okay. So what would our upper limit be? Lakshan?
243.9.
Yeah, because I just added one more tenth to it. Okay, do you see how I just added one more tenth to my number? What would that number be in if I just want to say it using hundredths? Junbok?
Hundredths?
Yeah. I mean tenths, sorry.
2,439 tenths.
Tenths, yeah. So it'd be 2,439 tenths. They're the same thing, but which one's easier to write? This one. Okay, what would be right in the middle, right in between 243.8 and 243.9? Alina? 0.85. Okay. Another way to say that though is 2,438 tenths and 5 what? Hundredths. So now what I do is I need to compare my number. I need to look all the way to the hundredths place now and compare it to my midpoint. Is this number bigger or smaller than my midpoint? Sonia? It's bigger because in my number I have 7 hundredths and the midpoint only has 5 hundredths. So that must mean I need to circle the top. Okay. Now let's try rounding this number to the hundredths. What would be my lower limit if I'm using standard form? What would be my lower limit? Well, all I need to do is I need to copy this number all the way to the place value where I'm trying to round it to. Ashwin, what place value am I trying to round it to right now? Hundredths. So will you read me that number to the hundredths place?
243 and 8,700.
You got it. Okay, so that's the lower limit. We don't need to write the thousands for the lower limit because we're not rounding to the thousands. We're rounding to the hundredths. If that's the lower limit, what's the upper limit? Ella?
24,300.
Ella said the upper limit is 24,388 thousandths. I mean hundredths. Is she right?
Yeah.
But if I want to use standard form, what would that number be in standard form, Ella?
Oh, 243. Wait, 224. Wait. Yeah, 243 and 88.
You got it. Okay, good. Now, what's the midpoint? What's right in the middle between 243.87 and 243.88? Sporty?
243.875.
Yeah, okay. So the other way we used to say it is 24,387 hundredths and 5 what? 5,000. So basically you're just taking the lower limit and adding 5 thousandths. Okay, so now let's compare a number. Is our number equal to or greater than the midpoint, or is it less than the midpoint? Alex, put the book away and pay attention to our math lesson, please. Alex, is our number bigger than or less than the midpoint? Is it bigger than the midpoint? What do you guys think? Alex, what two numbers are we comparing? Read me them.
I mean the bottom part and the upper part.
Right now we're comparing this number. What is this number?
Oh, 243.875.
Okay, to the midpoint. Read me that number.
243.875.
So is our number that we're trying to round greater than or less than the midpoint? It's equal to. So what do we do when it's equal to? We circle the upper.